so it's not going live.
It did say live stream. The YouTube is also showing live stream. You go to the, it's open. The
Where?
fourth tab from the left. Yeah, there, it's showing you your live stream, right?
Yeah, but why is it not coming up? Because I think I put the same link there. Oh, I didn't put the live stream link there. Oh shit. What did I put here? Okay, so that's my mistake. Okay. I think
Cool.
okay.
But everything's working?
Yeah, sure.
You're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, all the best.
Thanks.
I'll see you around there.
Sure, thank
Bye.
you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't put the live link. तो कभी यही होता है आराम से करना if the stream has started, there usually is going to be a lag. So hello everybody, my name is Nishant Malhotra and welcome to the webinar. There's just a slight delay. Mr. Ramanan is going to be joining a bit late. However, let me start the webinar. We can wait for maybe a couple of minutes, and then what I'm trying to do is I'll introduce you first to Jay Asundi and Ronald Abraham. The agenda is today to get to know the pandemic during the conversion during the pandemic and the pathways ahead. So let's just wait about 2 minutes and then we start with the webinar. So I'm pretty much audible right now, right? Sure, okay. So let me start. A very warm evening to Mr. Jay Sandhi and Mr. Ronald Abraham. Thanks a lot for joining, coming up for the webinar with the Middle Road. So let me start with an introduction. Mr. Jay Asundi is Executive Director and Principal Research Scientist at Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy, Bangalore, India, a leading science-based think tank in Asia, popularly known as CSTEP. The mission of the organization is to enrich policymaking with innovative approaches using science and technology for a sustainable, secure and inclusive society. Jay has led and set up many promising initiatives at his current organization, including spearheaded the establishment of artificial intelligence for social impact as a sector of work and the creation of the Center for Air Pollution Studies, is acronym for CAPS. His work in research and policy analysis is across many sectors that span from sanitation, urban development, energy, and climate. Jay has a PhD in engineering and public policy for Carnegie Mellon University. I mean, I've actually visited the university. It's a fabulous place. Pittsburgh, I think a lot of people want to go to US, must visit Pittsburgh. It's a fantastic place. And he's a chemical engineer from Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. He also taught system analysis and design and object-oriented design concept course as a faculty at Information Systems at the University of Texas at Dallas with a research focus on software engineering. His broad research interests lie in decision making and the development of decision support systems for several policy problems. So welcome, Jay. Fantastic to have you finally for a webinar.
Thank you, Nishant. Thank you for the warm welcome to the Middle Road. If you allow, I can make a short spiel as to what exactly we do. I know I can. I don't think I can share my screen right now, but maybe I'll just walk through this. It'll be a lot easier if I talk through that. So, the Center for Study of Science, Technology, and Policy is a not-for-profit think tank that started in the year 2005 and is based out of Bangalore. And the mission of the organization is to enrich policy making with innovative approaches using science and technology for a sustainable, secure, and inclusive society.
Jay, just
What?
to interrupt you, I think you
Yes.
can share now if you want.
Okay. Do you? I mean, I could just talk through it. I think it might the slides might actually distract people from paying attention to what I have to say. So I'll just continue in this manner. I think it might be just easier because it's not like I'm showing anything dynamic. So I think the important part that I would like to highlight is what we are doing in our approach that is different from most organizations is that a lot of it is solution oriented. We are looking at it from a perspective of being solution oriented. We are not into the dissection of what is going wrong and what's right. We do look at that, but it's always with the perspective of what needs to be done or what needs to be done going forward. So our approach is largely rigorous in terms of our research and analysis. And a big part of what we do is also engagement with our stakeholders right from the beginning, which is the inception process, through the data generation and also through final implementation. In fact, there are a couple of instances where we are working with various entities on the implementation process to make sure that apart from theoretically giving out ideas, also making sure what we give out is practical and that can be implemented on the ground. And that's an important perspective. We operate with a set of core values that we have. One is that it has to be research oriented, which means that we have to be objective, we have to be rigorous, we have to be innovative, and we also have to be pragmatic. So it's all over the place. But at the same time, we also want to make sure as an organization that we are developing leaders. That's a very important aspect that we think about, is that we want to make sure that we are constantly stimulating innovation. And I do see that as one of the topics that you're interested in talking today. And last but not the least, we want to make sure that our friendly and it has to be enjoyable to a large extent. Uh, we the one core value that we really hold dear to our hearts is also the notion of independence. Independence is very important for us because we feel that society needs independent voices, independent means of analysis, so that it is not driven by particular agendas. So that said, we have grown to about 130 odd people. We are based out of two locations, one in Bangalore and one in the Delhi capital region. The office is in Noida. And we have grown over the past 10 years at roughly about 20% per annum. Uh, uh, Needless to say, a lot of our support has come from various funding organizations, from Shiv Nadar Trust to the Tata Trust, and then also international organizations like the Oak Foundation. There is also the Bloomberg Philanthropies MacArthur Foundation. There's also the IDRC, which was a combination grant from the Canadian government as well as Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So there are a whole number of foundations that have supported us through our journey. The important thing that we have built in our capabilities is along four dimensions. One is on the issue of technology and policy assessment. That is where we look at engineering, economic modeling, cost benefit analysis, life cycle analysis, things like that. We also do a lot of modeling and analysis using existing tools. There are a whole number of tools, be it energy modeling, power system modeling, or even larger systems dynamics modeling. As you mentioned earlier, on the pollution side, we have built a lot of capabilities in instrumentation. So we know how to handle air quality sensors. We know how to do modeling, even in those aspects, and also low-cost sensors, which is something that people are talking about. And finally, we also develop our own tools for some of the policy analysis. And as you talked about, my specific interest is in decision support tools for policymakers. And that is where we have also developed some tools. I can talk about that later. By and large, we align ourselves along four broad dimensions. One is in the area of climate, environment, sustainability. Second is in the area of power systems and energy. Third is in artificial intelligence for social good. And the fourth area that we are looking at is the strategic studies, where we're looking at issues related to recycling of materials, circular economy, or even looking at electric vehicles and things like that. Uh, each of these areas have their own respective groups. I can talk about that in detail. Maybe it can come up during Q&A. Just to highlight two important projects that we have worked on in the last 10 years. In the past couple of years, we have been working with the Bihar government, and we have been integral in developing their clean air action plans for the city of Patna, Gaya, and Muzaffarpur. So these are plans that we developed with the State Pollution Control Board. And those plans have actually been adopted by the respective governments, and they are currently in implementation stage. We hope to see in the coming year improvements and working towards a clean air action plan. In the area of energy and power, an interesting project that we recently launched was on mapping of all the rooftops in Bangalore city. And the idea is that Bangalore could generate almost 2 gigawatts of solar capacity in the coming couple of years based on these rooftops. In fact, we've mapped almost 1,000 square kilometers on that. So these are some of the things that we are doing, and we are constantly looking at innovation and implementations that can take us forward in this manner. So I look forward to having a good discussion with all of you.
Thank you, Jay, for expanding what you're doing. I appreciate that. I'll have now a quick introduction. I want to also first introduce Mr. Ramanan and Ronald. So I'll start. Thank you, Ramanan, for again joining, and thank you, Ronald. We recently did a podcast also, so it's again great to have you here on the platform. So just for a very quick introduction, Mr. Ramanathan, we had a very detailed interview, is the mission director of Atal Innovation Mission, NITI Aayog, which is National Institution for Transforming India, Government of India, and additional secretary at NITI Aayog. The Atal Innovation Mission is a strategic and holistic national inclusive innovation initiative aligned with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, spanning schools, universities, industry, and NGOs. As the mission director of Atal Innovation Mission, Mr. Ramanan has been instrumental to date in the launch and execution of several national-wide innovation and entrepreneurship initiatives, resulting in 10,000 plus adult thinking labs, which is basically you're going to schools and spreading innovation right in the DNA of kids, being established in schools nationwide with more than 50%, about 5,100 plus operational in 660 districts, and over 2 million students have access to the innovative tools and technologies like 3D printers, LOT, robotics, miniature electronics, do-it-yourself kits. Under his leadership, AIM established 101 Atal Innovation Centers for startups and 26 Atal Community Innovation Centers in India. He also spearheaded the establishment of global, academic, industrial, and government relationships of AIMS aligned with its objectives. Mr. Ramanan is Senior Vice President of Tata Consulting Services. Prior to this, he was the Managing Director and CEO and a member of the Board of Directors of CMC Limited, a subsidiary of the globally acclaimed Tata Consultancy Services. Mr. Ramanan is an alum of IIT Bombay in electrical engineering and an alum of Harvard Business School Advanced Management Program. He is also accredited by Cambridge University in Sustainability Leadership. He was also elected as the lifetime chair of HBS, 87 alumni of Harvard Business School. So thank you, Mr. Ramanan, for joining in. Thanks a lot. And now I'll also have the privilege to introduce Mr. Ronald Abraham. Mr. Ronald Abraham is the founding director, founding partner and India director of IDinsight. Ronald has led several projects including IDinsight's unit at NITI Aayog, supporting the Aspirational Districts Program and the State of Aadhaar initiative, learning partnership with governments of Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, and education products which stir Akanksha and going to school. IDinsight is a global advisory, data analytics, and research organization that uses data and evidence to help leaders maximize their social impact. And just to add another thing, we talk, IDinsight was involved as impact evaluator for Educate Girls. That's the first impact development impact bond implemented in the world. So that's also a first for, that's a huge first, I think, in social space. Its collaborations, in these insights collaborations deploy a large analytical toolkit, including machine learning and randomized control trials, which is actually used, both were used in Educate Girls, to help clients design better policies, rigorously test what works, and use evidence to implement effectively at scale. Roland has worked at Pratham on the annual status of education report. It was one of the largest surveys in India, the largest citizen-led survey in India, and led his state-wise learning program with Government of Punjab. He holds a BA honors from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and Master of Public Administration in International Development from Harvard Kennedy School. A very warm welcome to also Ronald. So, so much of work has been going on in the pandemic. So let's start with Mr. Ramanan. You have come out with a lot of flagship initiatives specifically during the pandemic. One thing I really loved was your e-learning initiative, because that's what goes very core to my heart. So would you like to elaborate on all this, whatever you have, taken various steps, it could be in healthcare or whichever sector, which you think has been not only very innovative in its aspect, but has far-reaching consequences of reaching out to the less privileged, underserved sectors of the society, or anybody in general, especially during the pandemic?
Thank you, Nishant, and it's always a pleasure and a privilege to be part of a very august panel like this to discuss on topics which are of relevance and which are of very immediate, which demand very immediate attention from everybody. And I do hope that all the people who are logged onto this call are also safe and healthy and hearty in spite of these very difficult COVID-19 circumstances. And everybody is practicing the safeguards that have been advocated by your authorities or by your local institutions or by the government.
We are just to remind you, I'm actually I'm sitting in a co-working space. But...
Correct. We are indeed living in unprecedented times, as Nishant rightly remarked. We are living in a COVID-19 crisis, a crisis that none of us expected, which descended upon us so swiftly that we didn't have any time to react. It has disrupted lives and livelihoods across not only our country, but across the world. It has disrupted supply chains across the world. It has created national lockdowns, the effects of which everybody is reeling under. It has created tremendous problems for migrant workers, especially in emerging economies like India, where we have, our country is such a large country with 1.3 billion people. We have 715 districts. We have 600,000 villages. We have more than 8,000 small towns and cities, and we have only 8 tier 1 cities. And everybody flocks to these 8 tier 1 cities in search of livelihoods and in search of a better quality of life. And that's not a sustainable position at all. And these migrant workers who have come by the thousands are now suddenly have a choice between the devil and the deep sea. Do they protect their lives or do they protect their livelihoods? And in what way do we move forward? So the COVID-19, as Nishant and all the others have pointed out, has indeed been a moment of great awakening for all of us. Not only because it has created the fear of uncertainty, uncertainty about what the future holds, but uncertainty about many other things that we did not realize, but which have come to the fore. What about other global pandemics in the horizon? When will the next pandemic strike, even if we solve this one? What about climate change related issues that Jal talked about? We have been talking about climate change related problems for a long time. But when one of them strikes with the sort of impact that COVID-19 is having, then that will be a true wake-up call for climate change. What about nationalistic fervors that are rising very high because of this COVID-19, where people are now becoming increasingly protective, where borders are being shut down, where global economy and global connectiveness, even though it is there and is possible, is at risk. So these are all the various uncertainties that rise. But at the same time, I would say that the COVID-19 has revealed to all of us the tremendous opportunity that lies ahead. The fact that we are all discussing on this call, and maybe hundreds and thousands are logged onto such a call or onto the social media and are leveraging digital technology and digital platforms for communication, for keeping the businesses running, for keeping the lights on various businesses, for being able to still manage with supply chains, with a combination of digital supply chains as well as physical supply chains, and with people pivoting from whatever solutions they have created to new solutions that are demanded in the face of this crisis. That is the opportunity that is there in front of us. And that is what the Atal Innovation Mission is now seized with, in seeing how do we leverage innovation, how do we leverage entrepreneurship, how do we leverage this tremendous demographic dividend that we talk about in India, with more than 65% of our country under 35 years old? And how do we leverage affordable, accessible, available technology to the benefit of solving many of these problems? And of course, India has been a fast growing economy, one of the fastest growing economies of the world. How do we leverage the fact that we have been, barring the COVID 19 crisis, one of the fastest growing economies, and therefore able to support innovation, entrepreneurship, new initiatives in the country? This would not have been possible maybe 15, 20 years ago. But remember, today we are having more than a $191 billion IT ITS industry. India is recognized across the world for its knowledge capital and its intellectual prowess. It is some of our Indians and almost all the large companies, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, Sundar Pichai in Google, Shantanu Narayan in Adobe, and Arvind Ramakrishna in IBM. These are all testimonials that when Indians don't lack innovate, India doesn't lack innovators or great thinkers or great engineers or great scientists. And when they get the opportunity and an ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship, they thrive and they rise to their full potential. So that is exactly what the Atal Innovation Mission has been trying to do. Create first a culture of innovation in our young students, because you cannot have great entrepreneurs unless you create a problem solving, innovative mindset in our school students, in our university students, in the industry. And secondly, how do you create that ecosystem of entrepreneurship that will enable these innovative, young, talented students to express their creativity and their potential through startups and through entrepreneurial initiatives that they can launch? And that is why we have the thousands of Atal Tinkering Labs that Nishant mentioned, which is spurring a problem solving, innovative mindset in young school students. We are launching hundreds of incubators, which will foster thousands of startups to address the startup needs of our country. Like I said, and the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned very eloquently, Atmanirbhar Bharat stands on 5 pillars. The first pillar is the pillar of demographic dividend, which is what we are trying to do, rouse the demographic dividend to be able to deliver their best through education initiatives, through entrepreneurship initiatives, and through innovation initiatives, and creating that ecosystem. Second is a pillar of infrastructure, where we need to ensure that every part of India develops. The 600,000 villages that we have, therefore, we need community innovation centers. Therefore, we need startups from all of these places. Therefore, we need to create job creation and job innovation capabilities in every one of these centers. And that's why we are setting up hundreds of incubators and hundreds of community innovation centers in rural India, in tier 2, tier 3 cities, so that they will bring the benefit of innovation to solve not only COVID 19 problems, but also post COVID 19 problems. And then we are launching hundreds of challenges called Atal New India Challenges and Arise Challenges, Applied Research and Innovation for Small Enterprises, because MSME is the place where 70% of our informal labor force is associated with. And unless you create opportunities for them through challenges, through Make in India innovations, in every sector, in every vertical, and Jal, alluded to that, climate change, health. How do you promote health? How do you engage? How do you develop smart cities and smart villages? How do you ensure clean drinking water and sanitation for all? How do you ensure affordable housing? How do you ensure e-commerce? How do you ensure that the hilly and coastal districts of India are able to reach from Salem to San Francisco or from Sikkim to Seattle? How do you market your product there, leveraging digital technologies? These are all the wonderful opportunities that are there, but they need challenges to be clearly, offered to the young startup innovators, and they will respond. After all, the most encouraging thing in the last couple of months has been the news that India has leapt from a position of 81 in the Global Innovation Index to a position of 48. And that is a tremendous leap for a country, a young country that is just making its presence felt in the world. And when we have more than 50,000 startups and over 400 incubators in our country, we have the opportunity to be able to address a whole lot of requirements that the world needs, not only for social progress, not only for economic progress, but also for social good. And the point that Jal said about AI for social good. Now, why is AI so important today? Because of the tremendous developments in data communications, in data processing technologies, and computing technologies, and communication technologies. We have big data analytics, we have data mining algorithms. So all of this, and we have sensor technologies, which is feeding data from man, machine, device, and even satellites. So we have all of this coming together, and therefore there is a great opportunity for leveraging AI, not only for social good, but also for economic progress and for addressing problems of a country of the nature of India. So Atal Innovation Mission is very involved in all of this. And these are some of the initiatives that we can delve into greater detail. But one final point I would like to make is that all of this is only possible if industry, academia, government, and individual mentors come together. And that is also another very strong initiative of Atal Innovation Mission. How do you bring everybody together? It's not just a government initiative. It's not just a grant being made for somebody to set up an incubator or provide an infrastructure. We want successful companies. We want successful startups. We want startups that can become unicorns, which can become multinationals, which can serve the global community. We want to be vocal for local, but to be able to go global, as the Honorable Prime Minister says. So, how do we ensure all of that? That is what all these initiatives, government initiatives, is all about. And happy to share a few thoughts on this occasion. Maybe it was a bit longer than you anticipated, Nishant, but there is so much to talk about that sometimes it's difficult for me to stop.
I do understand. It's a lot of things, but you're right. Getting all the actors together, that's one of the most important things right now around the world. So just to before I go to questions, that we'll be having a 10 to 15 minutes of questions in the end, and I would come on a question of climate change to Jay. But before that, let me go to Ronald. Now, Ronald, you're doing something very interesting in the pandemic field. Would you like to share your thoughts there?
Thank you, Nishant, for having me on the middle road. I think it's a tough act to follow the really articulate speakers before me, Mr. Ramanan, Mr. Dal. But let me just give you a few thoughts from my side. Just to kind of introduce the insight, we are a data science organization. Our firm belief is that we are able to use data and evidence as a tool for social change. And there are kind of three pillars to what defines ourselves. So one is rigorous research tools that we make available. This includes tools from econometrics, data science, statistics, and so on. The second is to apply those tools very, very specifically to questions and issues that policymakers and decision makers in government and nonprofit space. So we bring the rigor of academia and R&D lab, but do it in a much more decision-oriented support manner and in a more tailored demand manner for our partners. The kind of the third, pillar of our work really is that as an organization that's so firmly grounded on data and evidence, we regularly our own work. So success within IDinsight is whether the insights we're generating is actually useful for the partners we're working with, and whether there's strong evidence of them actually improving their capacity as an organization and their operations and the lives that they are trying to improve through their work. We work across, which includes education, health, agriculture, energy, nutrition, so on and so forth. In the last 9 years since we've been in India, we've now worked pretty much operations in about, if I remember on last count, 17 or 18 states in India. So it's a little bit about us. We have offices across Africa and Southeast Asia and a couple of offices in the US as well. So specifically on the pandemic, I think there have been a few kind of broad themes of the work that we've done. I think one broad theme has been to provide public goods for various governments to improve the policy response. So this has included things like working with the Philippines government on immediately, right when the pandemic started, there was a lot of confusion on what the science was saying was what the guidance should be for the general public. And the Ministry of Health in Philippines worked with IDinsight to develop that guidance that then issued to the entire nation. We are currently working on a tool and it's going to be launched anytime next week, which is going to actually enable makers to help prioritize where testing needs to be targeted. What we know is that testing is an extremely important lever for the COVID-19 response across the world. But testing kits, there are different types of testing kits, as we know, antigen, RT-PCR, and there are different uses for them. And there is still in many parts of the world a good amount of scarcity for these testing kits. So in this resource-constrained environment, how do we think about where do we prioritize these tools, these kits? So we've generated a tool that enables people to kind of input a little bit about their context and output specifically where we would recommend the tool, the test be targeted. So this is going to be a publicly available tool, and it's already being used by some of our partners. So this has been kind of one part of our work, which is in the more public domain. The other is actually directly supporting our partners. So one kind of, I think, natural thing that is happening in the pandemic is that people are having to respond immediately, and they do not have the time to respond, as Mr. Ramanan mentioned. And one thing that is therefore happening is people are looking for partners who they can trust, and they can kind of hand over a lot of responsibility quickly and try to make collaborations quickly. So this is not, we unfortunately just didn't have the time to kind of scope out all the different like options out there in terms of who to work with, what to do, parcel things out. And so actually what's happening is that I'm sure Mr. Ramanan and Mr. Jal would also agree is that like your existing partners are coming to you and saying, can you support us on specific aspects of this response? So that has happened across the countries we're working in. An example of that is actually happening in the city of Delhi that we're in. So we've been working with the city of Delhi in education and health for about 2 years now. And when the pandemic hit, they approached us on helping build their patient and facility management system. So we worked with a technology partner and the Delhi government, worked through kind of different aspects of the response and where data needs to be collected, needs to be reported, and how to do it in a way that is seamless for the frontline workers so that we are not creating extra burdens on them in what is already a pretty stressful situation for them. So we work very closely with the Delhi government, disease surveillance teams, ASHA workers, and district leadership teams, and of course the state leadership as well in developing and building this system. So this is a little bit of the work that we've done on the pandemic itself in terms of kind of producing stuff widely used, and then also working directly with our partners on systems to help with their response. And Frank, and it is, when we were working in the Delhi project in the initial days, the cases were rising. They were really confused about what to do. They had, good spreadsheets on how to like manage the data, but this is an exponential disease. Obviously, kind of from a data point of view, they felt that they needed a much faster response. And we were able to come in, and within 2 weeks, we were able to put out the first version of a system. And within 6 weeks, we were able to make that first system an end-to-end system. And I think I tell a lot of my colleagues, it felt like, 8 years or 9 years of working as an organization, as IDinsight, we're only 9 years old, was all towards this moment. Because, it's like all years you had a lot more time, but it gave you the muscles to respond much faster when the situation demanded. So it felt very, this whole, we have, as an organization and all our colleagues, it's been a very busy and stressful period, as it is for everyone. And it just does feel like this is, it feels lucky to be able to be of some small use during this period. This is a global crisis, and the fact we can do a little is very, very fortunate. And of course, as we know, like our frontline workers and our medical staff are bearing the brunt of the response. But for us to be able to do something in a small corner on the side, I think has been a big privilege. So yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good insight, because in Educate Girls also you use data analytics to know which schools to target. So that's how it greatly helps. Now, before of course we come back to Mr. Raman, I need to go to Jay for a very there's a discussion on climate change. Now, India has done some fantastic job in that space. There's been credibility in terms of reducing the carbon dioxide emissions by 33% from the 2005 levels, and the fossil capacity is also going to be reducing to 40% by 2030. Now, there has been this India Energy Transformation Platform. This initiative has come from CSTEP. There's also Shakti Sustainability as an NGO involved here, and of course this an agency from Switzerland. So there are multiple actors. So would you like to talk about here with this groundbreaking initiative which you're doing?
I have to learn how to unmute myself first. Yeah, so thank you for just pointing this out. And I think what I would like to really do here is also dovetail into what Ramanan just talked about. That you see, at the end of the day, we have to understand that in our country, we have a fairly large and young population. We have aspirations, and these aspirations also have to be balanced towards the climate goals that we have set for ourselves. I mean, we cannot take the same path that other countries took for development. And this is a global problem. And I think as citizens of the globe, we are taking that responsibility quite seriously. As you know, the Prime Minister mentioned, and I think it was a surprise to everyone at the COP in Paris, the position the Indian government took, the fact that we would reduce our CO2 emissions intensity, that is CO2 per GDP, by almost 33%, and that we would go to fossil fuel free by almost 40%, which is, everyone at that time said, hey, this is unbelievable, it's too high, it's too ambitious. Now, many years later, innovativeness of the Indian population or the people tells you that many of these goals are achievable. I think they are achievable, and they are working towards that. So that said, one of the things that we did on the India Energy Transformation Platform is to basically come together in an informal, independent, multi-stakeholder group of experts, basically trying to figure out not just how India will achieve its NDCs, but also go beyond, right? Beyond 2030. It's not like the world ends at 2030. We have to go beyond 2030. What do we need to do in order to achieve some of the clean energy? That is, how do we get transition to a clean energy? It's not like you take a switch and you turn it off one way or the other. There is a transition that's going to happen. How do we go about doing that? How do we make sure that we achieve that? So I think in broad sense, we got together a bunch of experts where we looked at 4 important topics, and I'll stop there. One is on the issue of decentralized energy generation storage. Again, there's a lot of innovation going on in that space, both in terms of figuring out how to get energy to the people and make sure that it's clean. That's number one. The second, and also storage. I mean, there's a lot of innovation around storage. Second is industrial process heat. I mean, that's another area where there's a lot of energy we consume. We'll continue to consume, but I think if we do it more efficiently, there's a lot of opportunities there. Third is, of course, space cooling. I think all of us, we are all in that group of people where we understand that as we get warmer and warmer in India, we will need to be able to provide space cooling for all our population. How do we do that in efficient and efficient manner is very important. And finally, I think everyone will agree that renewable energy systems is the way of the future. We have to think about how to maximize on that. And I think this is our opportunity to show that India is innovative, it is at the forefront, and that we are not just solving the problems for ourselves, but we are also solving the problem for the rest of the globe. And I think that talks about the International Solar Alliance that sees that India is spearheading to basically make sure that whatever we learn, we also give to the other smaller nations that may not be able to leverage the size that we have. I think there are a lot of examples of the size leveraging that we are doing in India. I think it'll be great if we provide the same knowledge and transfer that benefits to other developing nations. I don't think we should treat ourselves as disconnected from the rest of the world. And I think there's a lot that we can offer to the rest of the world for this.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, that's a very good points which you have put in. Just to sort of, I got some bit of a data for cooling. I'll share that before I'll go to Mr. Ramanan for a question. Is that you talked absolutely right about air cooling. I mean, that's one part. Just to also about renewable energy, India's done a fantastic job. I read a report which says that we already have 35% of our total energy coming from renewable sources, and by 2030, I think the target was 40%. We're already 35%, so we could exceed by a huge amount. Now that, like Mr. Ramanan said, is for a young country which is on an uptake. That's a tremendous job. I think that's an excellent job. It's a lot of kudos to this. And but just to add on to what you talked about air circulation. Now this is a figures which I got from all the research reports which you have, fantastic reports which you publish. Now India in 2017 and 18 had 42% of the 135 terawatts hours of energy which was required. Out of that, air conditioner took about 42%, and it's going to go to 52% in the next 2 decades by 2037 38, which is and it's going to total energy consumption at that point of time in India would be about 585 terawatt hour. So if I translate that, which is like from 56.7%, it's going to 304.2, which is actually 436.2% jump in 2 decades, and that's almost like an annualized rate of 21.8, which is about 22%. So you're really, I mean, that's one part is that, like you rightly also said in a lot of discussions, that petroleum demand is going to come in. So that's a fantastic point. So, now we've seen climate change, we've seen pandemic work coming in. So, Mr. Ramanan, you're doing a lot of initiatives. I mean, during the pandemic, you have come out with innovation, and you've gone to innovative centers, you've come with SMEs, micro and SMEs, a lot of initiatives have come in. We also done great work in healthcare, and there are initiatives like Intel Health, which have come out. You have come out with ventilators. I mean, that was so important for during the pandemic, and you've come out, one great idea which I've liked is like going out there and giving, capital to startups to come and innovate in that particular space. So whatever you like, whatever you're very close to your heart, you could share any of these initiatives which you think.
Yeah. So, Nishant, I think that's a very important question. In fact, I would say the COVID-19 has been a watershed moment in India's startup history, I would say, because it is somewhat similar to the Y2K movement, which was there. Y2K introduced the capability of Indian IT to the rest of the world. The problem was a simple problem of Y2K. How do you solve, the transition between 1999 to 2000? And the world was under the grip of, large number of computer programs having inbuilt and hard-coded the numbers of 1999, and they didn't anticipate that after 2000 you're going to have this particular problem. And then they woke up to Indian software capability to address that problem. But what happened in the process was they woke up to the entire Indian software capability of not only addressing this problem, but beyond. In a similar manner, and then that has resulted in this tremendous growth of the ITS industry and $191 billion, which was unimaginable at that point in time. In a similar manner, COVID-19 has woken up to corporate India, the corporate sector, the tremendous capability that the startups bring to the table in being able to address not only the pandemic problem, but many new innovations that are required in a post-COVID-19 world, including the ones on climate change that Jay was referring to. So what we did, Atal Innovation Mission, actually, along with all the other ministries, as soon as COVID-19 struck, this was in the month of March, we launched a search for COVID-19 solutions across the country. We knew that vaccines are going to be some time away before we can get the vaccines. But in the meantime, can we find preventive, curative, or assistive solutions for COVID-19? And these could be ventilators, this could be PPEs, this could be test kits, these could be contact tracing solutions, they could be software, there could be hardware, there could be a combination of them. We needed face masks, we needed new sanitizing equipment, we need contact surfaces to be sanitized. Are there better sanitizers that we can make? Can we make contactable surfaces less prone to infection, or can the sanitizer work for a longer period of time? These were all the sort of challenges that we posed to the industry, not just to the startup community. And what was the result? In just a matter of 1 month, we launched the challenges around March of 15th or 16th or something around that time. Within less than 1 month, before April 15th, we had 1,500 startup solutions which were offered. And when we asked, we said, don't give up and give us an idea, give us a real solution. Because what we are trying to find out is solutions that need further support, financial support, manufacturing support, supply chain support, HR support, testing lab support, access to testing labs, and regulatory support. We need to know, what is your solution, what support do you need, and as a network of governmental organizations, we will try to bring that support. And out of this 1,500, mind you, these are all very good solutions, but we shortlisted 150 of them, identified very, very clearly the support requirements that they wanted. Then we approached the industry, and the industry rose up magnificently for this. We had TIE, we had NASSCOM, we had CII, we had FICCI, all joining in, and then many, many industry large corporates like Hindustan Levers or Unilevers and the Tata Group and so on. They all sprung in saying, we can help you in this manner. If you want supply chain, we can help you in this manner. If you want manufacturing support, we'll extend our manufacturing facilities to be able to manufacture in large numbers. And suddenly we had this tremendous vibrant exchange of innovation, expansion, right? Because we wanted to scale up speedily, deploy speedily, and so on. Today, now India is pretty self-sufficient in terms of mass, in terms of, I would say, test kits, and it continues to increase as the number of cases also continue to increase. But we do have a formula and a solution for addressing many of these problems. And what it brought to the light to the corporate sector was that if they are able to support these startups, I mean, we have 55,000 startups today in our country, but they were able to pivot very quickly. Unlike large industries, they were able to very quickly pivot to their solution. They were developing an AI solution for some other purpose, but now they pivoted that to address a COVID-19 or a post-COVID-19 problem. And that was the beauty of it, because the agility they brought into the game is something that we need at this point in time. Now, subsequent to that, there have been many initiatives. I mean, DBT has been working. They issued a national call for vaccine. More than 14 large industries have responded to that. There are 14 research institutions who have responded to that. So, they're all working. They're at different stages of vaccine. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the major vaccines come from India and at the earliest. I wouldn't be surprised at all, because the quality of attention that is being given and the quality of innovation and research that is going on in that is very important. Parallelly, what we did was we saw how do we, for example, at the school level, what do we do to keep the schools running in some manner? So we, in Atal Innovation Mission, for example, we launched a series of what we call as Tinker from Home modules. We launched 6 modules. We launched gaming modules, because we wanted it, students, when you're sitting at home and you want to study something, you're not going to study some theory. You want to, engage yourself. So we introduced gaming modules, and suddenly this took off like big time. All the students were very engaged. They wanted to create their own games. We launched a competition. So we launched the basic, medium and advanced modules for intermediate and advanced modules in gaming. We similarly launched app development learning modules. We said app development is becoming very important. And we have 50,000 people who registered for that. We also launched programs for teachers and mentors. We launched digital creativity and skills modules. So the whole, during this pandemic, I have had more active participation in the Atal Tinkering Labs than what I've had normally during the non-pandemic situation. primarily because digital technology is also enabled. But now, of course, there is a problem that there are many who don't have access still to digital resources. So that also came to stark light. Where is it that we need to focus attention and extend this digital connectivity and digital capability, and how do you make that happen? So we are working with various partners to see how we can have virtual labs, for example, how you can have use satellite technology. So we are looking at innovations in satellite technology, because satellite technology, everybody has a TV. How do you convert a TV into an interactive device? And what is a set-top box that we can enable so that young students can use TV, use a set-top box, and be able to have two-way communication, digital learning, and so on and so forth. Then we launched a series of challenges along with ministries for the MSME industry, because we have to bring back the MSME industry into sharp focus. And this COVID-19 has made us realize how important this is, right? How do you encourage the MSME industry? So we are launched on with 5 ministries: Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of um, with ISRO, with Defense, as well as with Ministry of Food Processing. We have launched what are known as Arise Challenges for the MSME industry. And actually, right now, we've already got thousands of applications for these challenges and innovations, which we are going to be shortlisting. And then we'll be connecting them to incubators, and we'll be also giving them a grant of 50 lakhs to the winners over the period of time that they have to make that innovation realizable. So these are all the initiatives that we are doing. I particularly just wanted to additionally remark on this climate change thing that Jay has referred to. India is so fortunate to be, after all, what is climate change is all about? We have problems. You have water, which can become an issue. You have river water and clean drinking water. That is a very important requirement. And you know that a very little portion of the earth is having drinking water, river water. So that is so important for us to preserve. We need to take care of the air, so emission control and all of that. We need to take care of our lands, which is the forests and the deforestation, the hills, the cities, and so on and so forth. We need to take care of the sea, because the sea is getting polluted with all the plastic and the waste and all of that is being emptied. Now, India has all of this surrounding it. It has the land, it has the rivers, the mighty rivers, the great forests, sea surrounding it. We are in a perfect situation to be able to look at climate change and actually experiment and come out with innovations that will address climate change in a big manner. And this is something that we are consciously asking every one of our innovators in our startups and the incubator world to focus on. Please ensure that climate change and sustainable development goals becomes an integral part of your innovation. Don't have your innovation just looking at, can I make most money? What is the biggest bang for the buck that I can do? Make sure that SDG is part of it. And the other point that Ronald has been working on with the aspirational districts. We have 115 out of 715 districts as aspirational districts in our country. They're at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of access to clean drinking water, sanitation, housing, 1 in 5 maternal mortality, 1 in 4 infant stunting, 1 in 3 infant mortality. We need to really change all of that through technology and technology-driven innovations, and remote medicines and telemedicine and distance learning and ed tech startups and so on. So there's a great opportunity for startups. And this is what we are trying to do through various collaboration between ministry, industry, as well as with the academia.
That's a very wonderful perspective. That's a very positive attitude. How we take pandemic, and that's where we come to the next question: is how we look at the opportunities and the innovation and make a positive use. Take this, get the best learnings and make the best of the pandemic. One I really loved about what you spoke was about the app making, which I feel is something which I should join, because I want to make an app for my startup, and I think this is a great opportunity to go for. So thank you for talking about what initiatives you have taken in e-learning. Now I'll go to Ronald with the second part, which is what we come to: what are the opportunities, what are the learnings which you can take, specifically innovation. What can we innovate? So Ronald would like to share whatever. It could be in data analytics, it could be qualitative, whatever you feel from your learnings.
Yeah, I mean, I think uh, I'll kind of share some thoughts from my lens, my vantage point, which is really around the way we can use data and evidence for making a better world. And I think the biggest thing, so what's kind of the broad trend of pandemic, right? I think for those who are not in the sector, the big piece has been that of the different sources of data, one kind of major source of data is like on the ground field surveys that has been completely taken out as a source of information. The other, actually, perhaps more critical source of data that I was surprised to learn about is that a lot of times when we work with policymakers, they will tell us, yeah, we heard about this, we know this, or like I disagree with you. When I went to a particular village or when I went to a particular district, I learned something else. And so there's kind of like a back and forth about like what our story and what their experience is telling. And so there is this other like source of information, which is our own experiential understanding of how the world is coming about based on the fact that we're traveling, we're going to different places. And that also stopped. And so actually, there was a major vacuum of information that was happening. So what I think, in my mind, it propelled organizations to do is really think about the alternate sources of digital data collection a lot more. Not that this happened in the pandemic. There's been a foundation of that transition for the last 10 years. Like I said in the other kind of question, like I think so much of our response pandemic is different from the previous global pandemic and other smaller pandemics, just because of the fact that we're far more prepared as a world because of our advances in technology and internet to be able to like respond to this pandemic in a very different structural manner than we have in the past. So that I think applied to the data analysis space as well. A few key pieces on that. I would say that IDinsight is part of a network of around, if I remember correctly, around 12 or 15 organizations that have innovated on digital data collection and have used that as a way to help feed data back and feed information back to policymakers, decision makers, both in government and also in the private sector, whether they're in for-profit or non-profit. And I think, I won't get into the details of that because that's probably a little bit boring, like what are the innovations that I might leave for a data seminar, not for this one. But I think to me, that has been one kind of major piece of the innovation bucket. The other I would say is that there's already been a lot of advances that have been made on administrative data systems and data systems in general. And there's a lot of data that's available from like private sector initiatives that are not related to anything one is doing themselves. So, for example, you have access to a lot of satellite data, a lot of telecommunication data that you could consider leveraging. I wouldn't, what I would say is that there has been some movement towards using this pandemic in thinking about how to develop COVID-safe data systems. Data systems that are responsive to COVID, and that can be a foundation for how one responds to diseases in general. So, there's already been talk within the Delhi government about how the systems that we helped develop for COVID can now also be used for malaria, can also be used for dengue, because they need technological responses for all of these pieces, and the momentum was not necessarily always there. Now they're also talking about like how to build on this work to build a much more unified data system for healthcare in the whole state, including various different providers, various different levels. Now, I think all of these conversations have all existed, and as Mr. Ramanan was saying, a lot of this feels like it's being accelerated by COVID-19. I'll end by saying, to some extent, like I would, I would resist to say all of this is an opportunity. Like, I think there is no doubt, to me, like, there is no doubt that like a crisis means that we respond to the crisis, and the response to the crisis can lead to opportunities. But ultimately, I think it's useful to just recognize that, this is like a devastating crisis, and therefore there is no, glossing over the fact that like lives have been lost, livelihoods have been lost, families and companies and everyone is facing a lot of anxiety. So yes, there is some opportunities that have come from it, but it's also like in the midst of midst of a major crisis. So I think like these are good responses that have helped for the pandemic and will help for the future. I think is the way I would characterize it overall.
Thank you. First, a couple of points like the healthcare initiative, getting the data, that's absolutely right. And I think you're absolutely right. My opportunity, I think I apologize, I used the wrong word. My better word would have been learning. What's the learning from the experience and what sort of innovation we could carry on. So, there's so many lives lost. Close friends of mine, friends of mine I know almost had tragedy. So the idea was, of course, like you correctly pointed out, learnings. Now, Jay, I'll go to you now. So what are learnings and innovations which you think has really come out? And you can be like not only talk about climate, you can talk across board, which you think which is so critical you think came out with it.
I think the important thing, the learnings that a few, I guess, to be honest, it'll be only a very small fraction of the broader economy. I think the first learning is the importance of the various workers that are working across the board. And as Ramanan pointed out, that 70% of the workforce works in the small and medium enterprises. And I think making sure that they stay resilient through all these, I would call them tsunamis of activity. I mean, be it climate change, be it COVID and any of these pandemics. I think making sure that that sector stays resilient and is able to continuously innovate and stay viable is very important through the pandemic. On the flip side, I think our work, I mean, if I would put myself in the boat of most of the companies that work on a desktop, right? So we are IT enabled services or an analyst services. One thing that we have learned a lot during the pandemic is how to try and work in a remote fashion. While we do see going back to office being very important, but at the same time, I think we have definitely seen the importance of the digital India perspective and how that can transform the way work can be done in India. I mean, it's no longer necessary that everybody crowds to the few cities in India. You could be sitting anywhere in India and be a productive. And this is a way to also include a lot of the population that may not want to move to the cities. And I think we all are aware that there are smart people across the country. And I think including them into the broader economy would be very important so that we achieve the aspirations of being that $5 trillion economy. I think it's very important that we include most of the population. I think a big fraction of the population is also women who are actually the fraction is falling in India. And in fact, we need to make sure that that fraction increases because it's a huge human potential that we should be able to leverage for our economy.
That would be, and you felt significantly in any of the the sectors which you looked at. There is something which apart from including, of course, you want to be more inclusive. That came out from your ideas. You think in India?
Yeah, so I mean, we definitely see we definitely see a lot of potential there, and in a lot of our work has been more in terms of the long-term potentials, and we've also seen how some of the work that we've been doing on the more near-term scale needed to build in this resilience. I think it's very important that the systems we build are resilient to any of these shocks that are likely to happen, and I think we are likely to see shocks, especially with climate change and any of these potential problems that would go forward. I think a resilient, sustainable society, economy, ecosystem is what we need, and we have to work towards that.
And so, Mr. Ramanan, now coming to the learnings and how they've been Like you have so many of the cases where you have seen, sometimes it's like adversity, brings a lot of creativity. I mean, it sort of brings in the best in you sometimes, because become by far more creative at that point of time. So anything you want to share here?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to. I think there are many learnings, of course, in all of this. But I would like to specifically identify six very important learnings. First is the need for innovation, and innovation does not be big bang innovation. That is innovation, small steps, small innovations are going to, all of them put together is going to create the big impact. And there is innovation needed in everything today, and there is a huge opportunity. It's a challenge also, but it's a great opportunity. India is a country of 1 billion people with, I would say, 1 million challenges, and 1 million challenges are 1 million opportunities, and that's what we should look at. And there are many small things. For example, schools, from Atal Tinkering Labs have devised a contactless bell. So when you go there, IoT sensors and surveillance centers sensors will automatically ring the bell as soon as somebody comes, and you don't have to press it. Such a small innovation, but it is meaningful. Hand sanitizers which are being created, boxes, ultraviolet boxes which are being created in order to keep material which is coming from outside for some time so that it becomes COVID safe. So there is a tremendous need for innovation, number one. Number two is there is a great need for collaboration. This is very important. This has brought out how important collaboration is between people. How do we work together? How do you practice social distancing together? How do we all collaborate with the government, with the academia, with the government, with the institutions where we are? How do we learn to work together in spite of this pandemic? This has brought out beautifully the fact that people can collaborate using technology and you leveraging distance communications and with tools and technologies, and still be able to work together. So one is collaboration from the point of view of leveraging tools, but collaboration as a mindset of being able to address the problems that we are all facing together. Third is this has brought out the need for inclusive sustainable development for everybody. Whatever you do, we cannot be aggravating this problem going forward. We have to very consciously see how we are going to minimize the effects, and that's why things like electric vehicles or biodegradables and all of that become so very important. How do we also ensure that our remote areas, the migrant workers, the problems of healthcare, education, and all of that is addressed? Unless we have inclusive socio-economic progress, and unless all our initiatives are targeted towards that, we won't have a sustainable future. Fourth is we need more involvement of industry, academic, and government in research, advanced research. The importance of research has become, and as Ronald also brought out, research in India has not been spending so much on research. We still spend only 0.8% of our GDP on research. I mean, we should be spending 2% or 4% or whatever for a country of our size, and that is very important. And private sector has to play a role. 70% of research in India is funded by the government. In any advanced economy, 70% is funded by the private sector. So how do we bring the private sector into strong focus? Because they are going to be ultimately the recipients, otherwise their businesses are going to die. The fifth is the need for a very positive approach in our attitude. I know we are in very difficult time, but unless you have positivity in your attitude, you're going to, just go down, and the fall is going to be very fast. So a positive approach in everything, but not a rash approach. Rashness as compared to a positive approach are two different things. So we need to open up the economy, but we need to take our steps. We need to ensure social distancing. We need to work in a different way in the corporates or in the offices. We don't need everybody to be there at the same time. We need to ensure they all wear masks. They practice sanitizing has to improve on a big scale. So there are many things that we need to do, but we need to still approach it positively. And finally, I would say, as the great Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see. That's the biggest learning. How do we become instruments of change rather than saying, oh, the world is not doing enough, the government is not doing enough, the company is not doing enough. How can we be the change that we want to see? I mean, these are the 6 learnings that at least I have gained through this last several months, and there are many more, but hopefully this are the most important ones that we need to address.
Thank you. I mean, you were really very articulated in coming out. There were a couple of things which I just loved. You're very right that this was a time when the whole wheel moves together with so many parts. So collaborative opportunities were like the need of the hour. You also talked about 0.8%, which India is. I mean, my inequalities report, I pointed out that India needs to put more of the resources in research. So, there were fantastic points coming in. So now we'll go to the last question, and I'll start with Ronald, then come to Jay, and finally, Mr. I'm going to come to you. Now, Ronald, you talked about a lot of interesting things. You talked about, data analysis, you talked about qualitative variables, you talked about various aspects of work. Now, how do you think is the pathways ahead going to change from here for the development sector, especially from the development sector? What do you think is going to be ahead? You could be very specifically talk about one sector, it could be very journalistic, or talk about the whole sector as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult to predict, but I think naturally there's going to be a stronger emphasis on digital tools in general. And the reason is that this gives, like the pandemic, for example, in education, not that distance learning has been immensely successful, but at least it gives us it has unfortunately forced many schools and parents to adopt it. What that means is that now many people have experience with it already, which is the basis for at least the good parts of that to be carried forward much more easily, because kind of the first hurdle always is the first engagement on any tool. And at least that has been achieved across sectors. So I think it's generally, I think, a preponderance of more engagement with digital tools, I think, is one. The other is specifically my sense is that there's going to be a lot more focus on improving our health system as a country in India. I think in general, the public health infrastructure has by and large not been able to serve the country of our size, which is evidenced by the fact that out-of-pocket expenditures of individuals for health is very, very high compared to their income. And the proportion of that expenditure, private healthcare, is much higher, despite the fact that the government is spending so many resources on public healthcare. So the focus on actually having a more robust health system is going to, I think, going to be another very important and welcome kind of like development from the crisis. As we know that, like, when World War I and II happened, like cities rebuilt, countries rebuilt, and like renewed infrastructure was accessed because of that after certain earthquakes that has happened, after the tsunami that has happened in parts of the world. I think this kind of, my sense is, my hope is at least that the pandemic is going to, it kind of revealed our health system for what it is, and hopefully it will be able to, it propels a much higher rate of change going forward. I think other like really positive development, I would say, is that we have gone through a very strong up and down phase about like the role of science and like scientific temper. And I do think that like there's just been a strong convergence about like the value of expertise, the value of scientific approaches, the value of data and evidence, the value of taking a consultative approach to decision making. That again is like one thing that the pandemic showed was that kind of all, like it's kind of almost showing up the deniers in a much more extreme way than like climate change. We have seen the climate change denials, right? Like, climate change has denials, the pandemic has denials, but the deniers of the pandemic seem to not carry the kind of weight that perhaps other deniers have. And I think that in general, we're seeing that kind of up and down that we've seen for the scientific temper, that to me, like there's some hope that again there's been a repositioning of the value of science, evidence, consultative decision making as the way forward. So these are some hopeful trends that I'm seeing in the development sector going forward.
Well, I mean, that's a fantastic point. You have very thoughtful suggestions. You are, specifically about the data systems. So that was really good. So Jay, I mean, you have been a master in this. You talk a lot about data systems, and what are your thoughts? Whatever across board, to add up or you want to put in.
I would like to start by saying I'm not a master at these things. We are all trying to figure this thing out. I think at a very broad level, I have maintained this for a long time, that it is the responsibility of us scientists and technologists to explain to the masses the value of the work that we do and why it is important for what we are doing. I think it's extremely important. I don't think we can take the ivory castle approach of saying that, you know what, we will do our work. It is your job to understand what we are doing. I think that a select set of people can continue to do that, but the vast majority of us, and I like to believe that I'm an average person, I feel that our work definitely needs to be conveyed to the public in a manner, because at the end of the day, it is the public that is paying for it, and it's the public that is going to be consuming it. So the example that I would like to give is in the area of air pollution. I think it is a problem that all of us are going to face. And I think it is important that everybody understands that when we talk about air pollution, we are not talking about it from a very, we are not talking about it from a very agenda position. We are trying to do it from a perspective of that it's good for all. And I think that's a very important perspective. And I think all of us in the area of science, technology, and policy, it is important for us to communicate some of these perspectives very clearly, very simply. And I think it's very important that it has to be in a manner that the average person can understand. Hopefully, over time, we will be able to raise the level of discourse amongst all. And I think it's an important perspective, because only that will build trust in our institutions and our perspective in the way we do things. If we don't, if we try to complicate matters, people will start losing trust in what we are trying to do. And I think it's very important. So overall, I would like to think that our ability to do good work has to be commensurate to our ability to communicate the good work to all.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. So, Mr. Ramanan, now to you. How would you want to end it up here?
Yeah, so I think both Ronald and Jay have really brought it out very well. One is how do we ensure that technology, data is going to help in solving many of the problems, and they are going to be very, very instrumental going forward. Like I said, technology is becoming affordable, accessible, available, and advanced. And we have a tremendous convergence of computing, communications, sensor technologies, which is happening across the world. And therefore, the unique opportunity for technology and data processing and artificial intelligence to be able to make sense of a lot of stuff that today we are not able to make sense of, and use them to advantage to solve many of the problems from a socio-economic point of view. That's why AI for social good becomes so very, very important, because it has that ability to do that, and it is able to see patterns that we have not been able to see, leveraging computing and mining and big data analytics, and be able to point us in right directions. But the second important thing that Jay brought out is very important. How do you ensure that everybody trusts technology? And this trust factor can only happen when we are able to first build awareness about what technology, science, innovation, research can do to solve current problems and future problems. And second is we have to take extraordinary care that we remove biases in the system. AI can introduce a lot of personal bias. How do we remove the personal bias? How do we ensure that everybody has an equal play? Take, for example, recruiting. If I just base AI on data which I've collected so far, you will still continue not to hire women employees. You will still not continue to hire a certain section of the employees just because they have not been as a part of the system so far. And you're going to have unpredictable, suggestions and decisions, which is going to affect us badly. So building trust in technology and therefore enabling awareness and ensuring that technology is used to solve problems that technology can create. It is a double-edged sword. Just like a knife can be used for surgery to save a person's life, or it can be used to kill a person. So also AI can do tremendous harm or tremendous good based upon how you are leveraging it and how you are removing all these biases and how you are able to bring trust into the entire system. And trust means awareness building, as Jay very accurately pointed out. And that cannot happen just overnight. It needs to have a sustained focus. It needs to be made evident through various initiatives. And I think technology is here to stay. AI is here to stay. No point in wishing it away. No point in saying don't bring AI because you're going to lose jobs and this and that and all that. You can paint a very dark world with technology, but look at a brighter world and see how you can do that. And like as they say, an optimist believes that this is the best of the world that he lives in, and the pessimist fears that it is true. So we don't want to be pessimists. We want to be the optimist who believes that this is the best of the worlds we live in. And I personally believe we do. And historically, science, technology, and innovation and research has helped humanity progress to where we are today. So if you actually take factual numbers into play, lifetimes have improved, accidents have dropped down, etc., etc. I mean, you have many statistics that are out there. But I think it is also very important to ensure that the benefits of technology reaches the masses, the rural districts, the coastal districts, the hilly districts, the aspirational districts in India and in other parts of the world. Even in the United States, I mean, it's still, you have 18% of the United States not having access to broadband. And that's an advanced economy we are talking about. And that's data which is out there, published by their own people. So when you have that sort of socio-economic divide and digital divide, you're not going to have a sustainable growth. So I think we have an opportunity to address that because there is a need. But more importantly, we can also show to the world and set an example, being the biggest democracy in the world. I mean, we are a democracy. That's a fortunate part. Sometimes it does delay progress, but then it is more sustainable progress than any other progress that one can think about. So that's my take.
Thanks a lot. For just a quick, I think Mr. Ronald wants to go. He's a board meeting. So thanks, Ronald, for really coming and sharing your thoughtful views. It's fantastic to have you on board. And I'll just wrap up. There's a lot of
Thank
great
you, everyone.
learnings.
Thanks, Ronald.
Thank you. Thanks, Ronald.
And just to wrap up, to talk about just there are few critical points which have come up. Which really truly we need to work in a collaborative model because that's the best we can use it. How we leverage technology either for whatever means, for data analysis or getting up the systems right. That is one of the most important ways we've come. How we can reach out to even more people, either underserved, less privileged, or go to aspirational cities. So these are some of the on how you keep coming out with these initiatives, even during the time when you are you are being cornered, or you have a deep end crisis which is going to come and stay. And these crises are maybe going to keep coming, and you never know going forward. And the best learning is, of course, how you're going to adopt the fastest way and working out. So thank you. I don't see any questions. I haven't gone and checked up if online, if they are. If you want to give me just a minute, I can check that, and then we'll just quickly wrap up. I really appreciate everybody joining in. But from what I have seen, just that if we have any questions, we don't seem to have any questions also in the so out here we so I think we'll wrap up. We've already reached the time. So I first deeply want to thank Mr. Ramanan and Mr. Jay for taking out time, speaking in depth about what we're doing some fantastic work in various segments. And since we had paucity of time, we still had a detailed discussion on a lot of wonderful initiatives. So thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nishant, for the opportunity. Ramanan, it's nice to meet with you again. Maybe we should chat offline sometime.
We should do that. You please.
I'll reach out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll reach out. We'll definitely talk again. All right.